What if I told you there's a number that predicts whether you end up in poverty or in abundance? Not your bank balance, not even your job title, but how you feel. Yeah. I was living in a room for students at 32 because I couldn't afford an apartment when I discovered a number that separates people who stay broke from people who break free. The number is 200. People below that emotional threshold have a 65% poverty rate and people above it close to zero. And the research behind this changed my entire life. And I know that's a big claim. So today I'm going to show you exactly where this number comes from, why it is nowhere as mystical as it sounds, and how I use it myself to go from barely surviving to actually thriving. Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a vibrational healer and I help people heal difficult emotions, emotional patterns, and their difficulties in life using the beautiful Bach Flower Remedies. And today we look at vibration and the correlation with wealth. Let's have a look at the map of consciousness. So now let's have a look at how energy can predict levels of poverty. Oh yeah. So Dr. David Hawkins was a psychiatrist who spent decades calibrating emotional states into what he called the map of consciousness. And that map is what I'm going to walk you through right now. So I'm putting this on screen now and I want you to really screenshot this because I'm about to show you exactly where you probably are. At the very bottom of the scale sits shame, calibrated at just 20 on this energetic scale. Its associated emotional state is humiliation, and from the state, life itself looks miserable. Just above it, guilt at 30, the emotional home of blame, where life looks evil. Fear at 100, anxiety, where life looks frightening, and so on and so forth. Now together, these make up what Hawkins called the survival paradigm. States rooted in lack and threat in the nervous system trying to protect itself. If you've ever felt stuck, there's a very good chance you were living somewhere in this zone, even briefly. And let me know in the comments, where on this map do you think you spent most of your time? For me, for a big part of my life, unfortunately, it was guilt. Now let's have a look at that gap between 175 and 200, because that is where everything changes. Right above pride sits the single most important number on this entire chart, 200. Courage, whose emotional state is affirmation, and from here life finally looks feasible. Hawkins called everything below this line force and everything above it power. Force is reactive. It depends on something outside you to push against. Power is generative. It comes from within and it doesn't need an enemy to exist or doesn't need anything to happen for you to react. Courage is the first level where you have enough energy to actually face life rather than just survive it. It's the birthplace of real change. And I need to tell you something before we go further. I worked with a client last year who came to me stuck at around 100, deep in fear. She couldn't leave her job even though it was crushing her. And this was real heavy fear, not just some vague anxiety. The kind of fear that really makes you stay frozen even when staying hurts. Now, within the first month, we started working with Mimulus for the very specific fears she had about leaving, what people would say about money running out, real fears. And then we added large for the self-confidence piece because she was convinced she'd fail at everything she tried. But here's what people don't talk about. She indeed nearly gave up halfway through. About 6 weeks in, nothing visibly had really changed yet. She was still at the same job, still afraid, and she told me she thought maybe this just wasn't really going to work for her. But something else was shifting underneath. She was sleeping better, she wasn't apologizing in every mail anymore, she sounded slightly more confident, came with creative ideas, small things. So we adjusted her blend a little bit, stayed with it, and by 3 months she didn't just quit her job, she started her own business. That's not coincidence, that's what this map actually shows us in real time. Now let me show you why this isn't just theory. So Hawkins correlated these consciousness levels with real societal outcomes, and the numbers are really striking. Below a level of 50, the perceived poverty rate is 65%, and the rate of people who say life is okay is 0%. Between 50 and 100, poverty sits at 40%, happiness just at a miserable 2%. But look what happens once people cross into 200 and above. Poverty drops to 1.5% and 60% report that life feels okay. By 4 to 500, poverty is down to 0.5%. Happiness is up to 79%, and above 600, poverty is effectively 0 and 100% report life feels okay. If you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, but you still can't break through, this is why. There's a sharp, non-linear jump in life outcomes right around that 200 threshold. People below it are disproportionately likely to experience poverty and unhappiness, while people above it very rarely do. And this is why I don't think vibration is a nice spiritual idea. I really think of it as one of the most practical things you can actually work on, because it doesn't just change how you feel, it changes what becomes possible for you. Now, I want to be really very clear about something. This obviously isn't about poverty caused by war, by exploitation, by systems stacked against entire groups of people through no fault of their own. That is not a consciousness problem, that is an injustice problem. What I'm talking about is something much more personal for those of us who do have real opportunity in front of us, resources, education, options, and still can't seem to reach them. That was me. 3 degrees, real opportunities available, and I still couldn't access any of it because something inside of me was simply in the way. Now, you might be looking at this thinking, oh, it's just correlation, or is there really something causal here? Does raising your vibration actually raise your access to abundance? Or is it simply that, well, abundance makes it easier to feel good? I think it's actually both. Your vibration isn't just a reaction to your life. In real sense, it's the seed of it. You feel something first, you decide to live from that place, and the outside world follows. Not instantly and not without effort, but genuinely. I know this because those numbers were me for years. For most of my life, I lived from guilt, constant, quiet guilt underneath almost everything I did, really. And remember, guilt was really right at the bottom at 30. I had 3 bachelor degrees, one in orthopedagogy, one in research of nature, and one in education. I had trained in multiple healing modalities, like herbalism, biomagnetism, esoteric sciences. I worked so incredibly hard, and still, I just couldn't support myself financially. I couldn't land a job that felt right. I wasn't happy, and even with everything I knew, I couldn't fully help myself either. I remember sitting at my desk with another rejection email open, if I would even get any. And instead of feeling angry, I kind of felt I deserved it. That's what guilt does. It convinces you that struggle is your fault and also your fate. Maybe you have worked incredibly hard and still felt nothing moving. Yeah, I really get it. Yeah, that was very demoralizing. I was there too for years. I kept looking outward for the fix. Another qualification, another modality, another job application. And yes, all of that mattered, and none of it, I think, was wasted. But to be honest, the real change never came from any of it at all. Now, what actually changed my life was addressing the guilt itself, the lack of boundaries, the lack of self-confidence, sitting underneath everything I was doing. And once I began shifting that, once my vibration actually started to move up, my outer life followed. Not because I worked harder, but because I was finally working from a different place. But before the money changed, something else changed first. I stopped apologizing for things that weren't my fault. I'd catch myself about to say sorry for asking a question or something like that, and I just stopped before doing that. I felt more relaxed when receiving. When a client said thank you, I didn't deflect it anymore. I could actually take it in. And I felt less pressure to perform, to prove I was worth what I was charging, to over-deliver, just to justify my existence. I also started attracting different clients, people who were on the same level of integrity, people who didn't try to haggle or expect free work, people who valued what I offered without me having to convince them first. That shift obviously happened before my income changed. But it was the thing that made the income change possible. In fact, I could work less, but better, have more space, more time, more rest for myself, and I earned 20 times more. That's why I don't separate inner work from outer results anymore. In my experience, they were never actually separate at all. If you find yourself stuck vibrationally, and I don't mean that in a very general way, I mean you actually feel it in your own life. Things aren't moving the way you want them to. You keep circling the same pattern, no matter what you try. If that's you, please, why don't you come to my free masterclass? I would love to have you there. And this is exactly where we begin working on getting you moving in the right direction. Obviously, we won't heal everything at once. That was never the promise, and that's just not realistic. But I will give you a real starting point. You'll leave with insight, with tools, with a sense of what's actually possible for you. And more than anything, with something very personal, real support, your first step forward, and the recipe for your very own remedy blend in case you'd like to start raising your vibration using Bach Flower Remedies. The link is in the description or in the pinned comment, together with a link to my private guidance program if you want to work with me one-on-one. Now, if you looked at this chart and immediately started scanning for where you are, I want to invite you to soften that, because this was never meant to be another way to judge yourself. Some days you'll be in the lower of this map. That's not a verdict on who you are. It's simply where you are right now. And right now is simply allowed to be exactly what it is. None of these states are permanent addresses. They're more like weather. You might wake up in fear, spend the whole afternoon in anger, and drift into acceptance by evening. That's not failure at all. That is simply being human, moving through the full range of what it means to be alive. But so many of the patterns I work with, the guilt that blocks people from receiving money, the shame that keeps someone silent about what they actually need, the fear that repeats the same relationship pattern over and over, these all live in that lower half of the map, and very often they are very unconscious too. And what I found again and again is that Bach Flower Remedies can gently support movement out of these lower states, not by forcing anything or by pretending you're somewhere you're simply not. Someone once told me this map was just theory. And I get that reaction. When you first see it, it looks very abstract, numbers on a chart about frequency. But then we go through the shifts in real life, and it stops being theory very, very quickly. You feel the difference between living at 30 and living at 200. You see what becomes possible when you're not operating from guilt or fear anymore. You watch your bank account, you watch your relationships, your entire life reshapes itself around who you're becoming. That is not theory, that's just what happens when the emotional blocks finally move. And this is also, I think, why remedies work so differently from simply thinking positive. You can't talk yourself from shame to love, but you can be gently, patiently supported as you move one honest step at a time. If you want to work on your vibration, work on your access to abundance, here's a playlist you can look at that will help you understand your exact patterns and match it to the right remedies. Thank you so much for watching. I really loved making this video, and I'll see you in the next one.